The desert night was silent except for the gentle whisper of wind across sand. Stars crowded the sky above, impossibly bright and clear in the absence of human light pollution. Daniel sat cross-legged atop a mesa, his weathered face turned upward, eyes reflecting the cosmos. He had been waiting for this moment for 63 years. The first sign came as a subtle disturbance in the upper atmosphere, a ripple that would be invisible to conventional instruments and undetectable to ordinary human senses. But Daniel was no ordinary human. His perception extended far beyond the limitations of standard biology, allowing him to feel the massive object decelerating as it approached Earth orbit. "They're back," he whispered to the empty desert. Daniel closed his eyes, focusing his mind. Within seconds, he felt the familiar sensation of minds connecting to his. Dozens at first, then hundreds, then thousands. The Unity, a vast psychic network linking those like him across the planet, hummed with nervous energy as awareness spread. Confirmed. Imperial signatures detected. 3 vessels separating from mothership. Deployment patterns suggest reconnaissance. Military contingent larger than previous visitations. The thoughts flowed through the Unity like currents in a vast ocean. Daniel remained the calm center, absorbing information while maintaining focus. "They're searching for us," came a younger voice, one of the newer awakened who had only recently joined the network. "They've always been searching for us," Daniel replied, "but this time they're doing it officially." He opened his eyes, gazing once more at the stars. Somewhere up there, hidden from human telescopes by technology centuries beyond Earth's capabilities, a Vraxian mothership had taken position. The empire that had created his ancestors, then abandoned them, then tried to eliminate them, had returned. For generations, the awakened had prepared for this moment. They had infiltrated governments, military organizations, scientific institutions, securing positions of influence while remaining hidden in plain sight. They had encouraged human myths about alien visitations, abductions, and government conspiracies. These stories served as perfect camouflage. The truth was dismissed alongside the fiction, allowing the awakened to operate undetected. Daniel stood, brushing sand from his jeans. His outward appearance, that of a man in his late 60s with sun-weathered skin and silver-streaked hair, belied his true nature. The luminous quality of his eyes, visible only in darkness, was the sole external indication of his hybrid genetics. "It is time," he projected through the Unity. "Alert the others. Prepare for first contact." As he made his way down the rocky path to his waiting vehicle, Daniel felt a familiar presence touch his mind, ancient, powerful, distinct from the awakened consciousness. "They come seeking answers," the presence whispered, "but they do not yet know the questions." Daniel smiled into the darkness. "Then we shall help them learn to ask." The old pickup truck's engine rumbled to life, headlights cutting through the desert night. As he drove toward the coordinates where he knew the Vraxian scout ship would soon land, Daniel rehearsed the words he had been preparing for more than half a century. Words that would change 2 worlds forever. "And get this, they believe we abduct them to perform experiments." Lieutenant Zextara projected the image of a crude human drawing depicting a gray-headed alien with enormous black eyes. Raucous laughter erupted throughout the briefing chamber. The gathered Vraxian soldiers, with their iridescent blue-green skin and 4-fingered hands, found the human depictions particularly amusing. Their own appearance, standing nearly 7 feet tall with bioluminescent markings and retractable gill-like structures along their necks, bore little resemblance to the primitive sketches humans had created. "Silence!" Commander Vrexnall's voice boomed across the chamber. The commander's heavily scarred face and missing left antenna marked him as a veteran of the Andromeda conflict, a war that had claimed billions of lives across 3 galaxies. The room fell instantly quiet. "You find this amusing? Our upcoming mission to Earth is not entertainment. This is reconnaissance, pure and simple." The commander's secondary eyelids blinked horizontally across his amber eyes. "The humans may be technologically primitive, but they are resourceful and dangerous in ways you cannot imagine." Lieutenant Zextara's facial ridges flushed a deep purple with embarrassment. "Apologies, Commander. I was merely highlighting the numerous misconceptions humans have about extraterrestrial life." to prepare the squad for potential encounters. The commander's gill flaps tensed. "Continue the briefing, Lieutenant, but with more respect." "Yes, Commander." Zextera touched her chest in the formal military salute of the Vraxian Empire. "As I was explaining, humans have developed various myths about alien visitors. Most believe we do not exist. Some think we visit occasionally, but their governments hide the truth. A small percentage believe we regularly interact with Earth." A young soldier raised his hand. "Why haven't we made official contact? Their technology suggests they've achieved Level 2 civilization status. According to Imperial Protocol 875B, that qualifies them for—" "Because," the commander interrupted, "Protocol 875B was written by bureaucrats who've never set foot on a battlefield." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Earth is quarantined for reasons beyond your security clearance." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Zextera cleared her throat. "Moving on to mission parameters. We'll establish 3 observation posts, one in what humans call the Mojave Desert, another in the Siberian region, and the third underwater in their Pacific Ocean. Our cloaking technology will render us completely invisible to human detection methods." The briefing continued for another hour. As the soldiers filed out to prepare for deployment, Commander Vrexnael remained seated, staring at the holographic image of Earth rotating slowly above the table. "You didn't dismiss me with the others," came a voice from the shadows. "You wanted to speak privately." The commander didn't turn. "Your perceptiveness was always your strength, Kexor." Captain Kexor stepped forward, his ceremonial battle armor gleaming under the dim lights. Unlike most Vraxians, his skin had taken on an ashen gray tone, a rare genetic response to extreme combat stress. The condition was so uncommon it had become something of a legend among the troops, the warriors who'd turned gray. "You're troubled by this mission," Kexor stated. "The young ones joke about human myths." The commander finally turned to face his old friend. "They don't know what we know. They don't need to know," Kexor replied firmly. "Don't they?" The commander's voice took on an edge. "They laugh at stories of abductions and experiments. They mock human accounts of crashed ships and government cover-ups. Those are just coincidences, malfunctions, mistakes made by undisciplined scouts." The commander's fist crashed down on the table. "Don't insult my intelligence. You were there with me during the 47-3 incident. You know exactly what we did." Kexor's posture stiffened. That was 60 Earth years ago, different times, different orders. And yet here we are again, circling their world, watching, waiting. The commander gestured at the hologram. "These humans, they sense something. Their myths contain fragments of truth, distorted, misunderstood, but truth nonetheless. What are you suggesting?" Kexor's voice had taken on a dangerous tone. The commander stood up, towering even over his tall captain. "I'm suggesting nothing. I'm stating fact. This mission is different. Imperial Command isn't telling us everything. They never do," Kexor replied dryly. "This time feels worse." The commander's gill flaps fluttered with agitation. "I've received orders directly from the High Council. We're to identify something called the Awakened Ones among the humans." Kexor's eyes widened. "That's impossible. The genetic markers were eradicated millennia ago." "Apparently not. Our ancestors were thorough, but not perfect." A heavy silence fell between them. "If there are humans carrying those genetic markers," Kexor began, "then everything changes," the commander finished. "Everything we've told our soldiers about Earth being simply another observation posting is a lie. They're not ready for the truth." The commander's amber eyes flashed. "Then they better get ready quickly. Because if we find what the Council fears we'll find, this won't be reconnaissance for much longer." The next day, 3 Vraxian scout ships departed from the mothership hidden behind Earth's moon. Each vessel, shaped like elongated teardrops with pulsing bioorganic exteriors, carried a team of 15 specialists. Junior Science Officer Mex Leary could barely contain her excitement as their ship descended toward the Mojave Desert. This was her first field mission after graduating from the Imperial Academy with honors. She had spent years studying human culture, language, and biology, yet had never seen a living human. "You're vibrating like a nestling," her superior, senior science officer Rax Voon, remarked dryly. "Apologies, sir," Mex Leary replied, forcing her gill flaps to remain still. "It's just, we're about to establish direct observation of the most enigmatic species in Sector 7. Enigmatic? Hardly." Rax Voon snorted. "Humans are predictable, territorial primates who've barely managed to leave their own atmosphere. Your fascination is misplaced." Before Mex Leary could respond, Captain Kexor approached them. Up close, his gray skin was even more startling, almost luminous against the darker tones of his armor. "Sir," both scientists snapped to attention. "At ease," Kexor said. "Officer Mex Leary, I read your thesis on human mythological constructs regarding extraterrestrial contact. Impressive work." Mex Leary's facial ridges flushed blue with pride. "Thank you, Captain. I'm assigning you to work directly with me on a special aspect of our mission." Rax Voon's gill flaps fluttered with surprise. "Captain, with all due respect, she's inexperienced. Her expertise is precisely what I need," Kexor interrupted. "The commander has authorized this reassignment." As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, the ship's cloaking systems engaged, bending light around their vessel and rendering it invisible to human detection technology. The desert below stretched out like a vast orange-brown canvas. "Landing zone secure," announced the pilot. "No human settlements within scanning range." The ship touched down silently among a cluster of rock formations. Once their base was established, a process that took less than an hour with their advanced technology. Captain Kexor summoned Mex Leary to his private quarters. "What I'm about to share with you is classified Imperial secret," he began without preamble. "Do you understand what that means?" Mex Leary straightened her posture. "Yes, Captain. Disclosure carries penalties up to neural wiping or execution." "Good." Kexor activated a small device on his wrist. A shimmering field enveloped the room, a privacy barrier impenetrable to eavesdropping technology. "Your thesis mentions something called the Roswell incident. Tell me about it." Mex Leary blinked in surprise. "It's a human conspiracy theory, sir. In 1947, something crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. The American military initially reported it as a flying disc, their term for unidentified spacecraft, but quickly changed their story, claiming it was merely a weather balloon. And what do you believe happened?" Mex Leary hesitated. "Officially, there's no record of any Imperial presence on Earth during that time period." "Officially," Kexor repeated. "Go on." "WL. There are inconsistencies. Human eyewitness accounts describe technology and materials inconsistent with their capabilities at that time, and there's a gap in our Imperial exploration records for that sector during that specific time frame." "A gap," Kexor said softly. "How diplomatic of you." He touched his wrist device again. A T3-dimensional image appeared between them, an old Vraxian military vessel, its design outdated by modern standards. "Scout ship VX-47-3, Kexor said. "Reported loss during a magnetic storm in the Cygnus sector. Crew of 7, all presumed dead." Mex Leary's eyes widened. "But that's not what happened." "No," Kexor's expression darkened. "The ship malfunctioned near Earth. The pilot attempted an emergency landing. It didn't go well. Were there survivors?" The commander and Mex Leary gasped. "You? But that would mean—" "I'm much older than I look," Kexor said with a grim smile. "Imperial medical technology has its benefits." "What happened to the other crew members?" Kexor's face hardened. "They died on impact. We burned their bodies to prevent contamination of the ecosystem. But before we could destroy the wreckage, human military forces arrived. We barely escaped." "The humans recovered your ship," Mex Leary whispered. "Parts of it. Enough to advance their technology by decades, though they still don't understand most of what they found." Mex Leary's mind raced. "But why tell me this now? Why is this relevant to our current mission?" Kexor's eyes fixed on hers. "Because that crash wasn't an accident. Our ship was shot down. By humans? That's impossible. Their weapons couldn't." "Not by humans," Kexor interrupted. "By someone or something else, something already on Earth." The next 3 days were a blur of activity as the Vraxian team established their observation post. They deployed hundreds of microscopic drones disguised as Earth insects to gather data from nearby human settlements. The desert location had been chosen specifically for its proximity to several military installations that humans believed were secret. Mexleary found herself unable to sleep, her mind spinning with the implications of what Captain Kexor had revealed. If the Empire had been observing Earth for longer than officially acknowledged, what else might they be hiding? On the fourth night, alarms blared throughout the base. "Proximity alert. Unidentified approach vector," shouted the security officer. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as soldiers rushed to their stations. Captain Kexor emerged from his quarters, fully armored. "Report," he demanded. "Single human vehicle approaching from the southeast," responded the sensor operator. "Primitive ground transport. One occupant." The captain's expression remained unreadable. "Maintain cloaking. Prepare non-lethal containment protocols." Mexleary followed the captain to the observation deck. Through the transparent barrier, they could see a dust cloud rising in the distance as a human vehicle, a rugged all-terrain type, bounced across the desert floor. "How could they have detected us?" Mexleary whispered. "That," said Kexor, "is the question." The human vehicle stopped approximately 200 meters from their hidden base. A single figure emerged, tall for a human, wearing simple clothing and a wide-brimmed hat against the desert sun. The human looked directly at their cloaked ship and raised both hands in what appeared to be a gesture of peace. Then, to the shock of every Vraxian watching, the human spoke in perfect, if accented, imperial standard. "I know you're there. I've been waiting for your return." Stunned silence fell over the command center. "Impossible," breathed the communications officer. Captain Kexor's face had gone completely still. "Prepare a containment field." "I'm going out, sir," protested the security chief. "Protocol dictates." "I know the protocol," Kexor snapped, "and I'm overriding it." Mexleary stepped forward. "I request permission to accompany you, Captain." Kexor studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Stay behind me at all times." Minutes later, they stood at the base's entry port, a containment field humming around them. The outer door slid open, revealing the harsh desert landscape. As they stepped outside, their ship remained invisible behind them. The human had not moved. Up close, Mexleary could see it was an older male, with weathered skin and eyes that seemed unusually bright, almost luminous, in the desert sun. "Identify yourself," Captain Kexor commanded, in human English. The man smiled. "You can call me Daniel, though that's not the name I was given by my mother." He switched to Imperial Standard once more. "You've been gone a long time, Captain." Kexor's posture stiffened. "How do you know our language?" "The same way I know you're not here for the reason you think you are." Daniel's eyes shifted, focusing on Mexleary. "They didn't tell your young ones the truth, did they? About what happened here before? About what your people did to mine?" "Be silent," Kexor warned, his hand moving to his weapon. Daniel laughed, a sound without humor. "You can't silence what's already awakening, Captain. Your empire made sure of that when they seeded our world." Mexleary looked between the human and her captain, confusion evident in her expression. "Seeded? What is he talking about?" Daniel's gaze remained fixed on the captain. "She doesn't know. None of them do." He gestured toward the hidden ship. "You keep your soldiers in the dark, feed them stories about human myths and conspiracies, while the real conspiracy has been yours all along. Captain?" Mexleary's voice wavered. Kexor's gill flaps tensed with anger. "This human is delusional. Prepare to." "Earth wasn't just another observation post," Daniel interrupted. "It was an experiment. A very, very long-term experiment." Mexleary felt a chill run through her body despite the desert heat. "What kind of experiment?" Daniel smiled again, but his eyes remained cold. "Why don't you ask your captain? Or better yet, ask Commander Vrexnall. He was here for the beginning." "The beginning of what?" Mexleary demanded. "The hybridization program," Daniel said simply. Captain Kexor moved with surprising speed, raising his weapon and firing a stun blast. But somehow, impossibly, Daniel moved faster, dodging the energy beam with inhuman reflexes. "That won't work on me, Captain," Daniel said, his voice unnaturally calm. It never did. Max Leary watched in shock as Daniel's eyes began to glow with a faint internal light, the same bioluminescence that marked Vraxian eyes. "What are you?" she whispered. "I am what your people created," Daniel answered. "One of the awakened ones you've come looking for." Back on the mothership, Commander Vrexnall paced the command deck with growing agitation. It had been 12 hours since he'd lost contact with Captain Kexor's team. The other 2 observation posts reported normal operations, but the Mojave team had gone completely silent. "Prepare my personal transport," he ordered. "I'm going down there myself." His second in command stepped forward. "Commander, with respect, protocol dictates that in case of compromised operations we should." "I know what protocol dictates," the commander snapped. "And I'm telling you that protocol won't help us if what I fear has happened." 2 hours later, the commander's vessel touched down beside the silent Mojave base. Scans showed life signs inside, Vraxian, not human, but no one responded to communications. With a heavily armed security team, Commander Vrexnall entered the base. They found the crew unconscious but alive, showing no signs of physical trauma. In the command center, only one figure remained awake. Max Leary sat alone, staring at a holographic display showing data Vrexnall immediately recognized. "Where is Captain Kexor?" the commander demanded. Max Leary looked up slowly. "He went with the human, the one who calls himself Daniel." "Went where?" "To see the others, the awakened ones." The commander's blood ran cold. "What do you know?" "Everything," Max Leary replied. Her voice was distant, detached. "I accessed the sealed files. The real history of our involvement with Earth." The commander signaled for his security team to leave them. When the door sealed shut, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "What you've done is treason." "What our empire did to the humans was worse," she replied. 100,000 years of genetic manipulation, creating a slave species. And when they rebelled, our ancestors tried to eradicate them, but some survived. "It was war," the commander said defensively. "They were becoming too powerful too quickly, because that's how we designed them." Max Leary stood up, her gill flaps flaring with emotion. "We gave them accelerated learning capabilities, adaptive genetics, potential for exponential intelligence growth. Then we were surprised when they used those gifts against us." "You speak of ancient history as if you understand its context," the commander dismissed. "Those decisions were made in a different era, under different circumstances. And yet, here we are again," Max Leary said, echoing the commander's own words to Kexor days earlier, "making the same mistakes." The commander stepped closer, his massive frame looming over her. "Where did Kexor take the human?" "He didn't take the human anywhere," Max Leary replied. "The human took him." Before the commander could respond, alarms blared throughout the base. "Multiple approaching vehicles," announced the automated security system. "Human military signatures detected." The commander rushed to the sensor display. "Impossible, our cloaking has been compromised," Max Leary finished. Daniel knew exactly how to disable it. Outside, a convoy of human military vehicles surrounded the now visible Vraxian ship. Soldiers poured out, weapons raised but making no aggressive moves. They formed a perimeter and waited. "They're not attacking," the commander noted with surprise. "They're waiting," Max Leary said. "For what?" As if in answer, a single vehicle approached from beyond the military cordon. It stopped directly in front of the base entrance. Captain Kexor stepped out first, followed by Daniel and 3 other humans, all with the same luminous quality to their eyes. The commander's communications device activated automatically. "We're coming in, old friend." Kexor's voice came through clearly. "It's time we finished what began at Roswell." "This is madness," the commander hissed. "Those humans, they're abominations." Max Leary looked at him with sudden understanding. "You're afraid of Tem. They should have died out millennia ago, but they didn't," Max Leary said. "They survived. They've been hiding, waiting, knowing someday we would return." The commander's gill flaps pulsed with barely controlled rage. "Do you understand what will happen if word of this reaches the Empire? If humans, hybrids, with Vraxian genetics and abilities become known? Revolution, Mexleary stated simply. The truth about our empire's origins. The knowledge that we created another sentient species and then tried to exterminate them when they sought freedom. I won't allow it, the commander growled, drawing his weapon. It's too late, Mexleary said. Captain Kexor has already transmitted everything to Imperial Command. The human myths you mocked? They're not myths. They're memories. Genetic memories passed down through generations of hybrids waiting for this moment. The base entrance slid open. Captain Kexor entered first, followed by Daniel and the other hybrids. The humans moved with a strange fluidity that seemed both familiar and alien. Commander, Kexor said formally, may I present representatives of the Awakened? Daniel stepped forward. Up close, the commander could see the subtle non-human aspects of his features, the slightly elongated structure of his skull, the unusual distribution of musculature. We've waited a long time for this meeting, Daniel said in perfect Imperial standard. Since your ship crashed at Roswell, we've known you would return in force. You shot down our ship, the commander accused. A defensive measure, Daniel replied calmly. Your crew was conducting abductions in the area, experimenting on humans, looking for signs of the hybrid genome. And now? The commander asked, his hand still on his weapon. Now we negotiate, Daniel said. As equals. The commander laughed bitterly. Equals? Your abominations, failed experiments from a forgotten war. We are your children, Daniel corrected. Created by your ancestors, abandoned, hunted, and yet, here we stand. We've infiltrated every level of human government. We've been preparing for your return for generations. Preparing how? Mexleary asked. Daniel smiled, the expression both human and not. By creating the very myths your soldiers laughed at, by ensuring humans would fear alien abduction, that they would suspect government cover-ups, that they would doubt the official narrative. We've been hiding in plain sight, protected by the very conspiracy theories your young ones find so amusing. The commander looked at Captain Kexor. You've betrayed your own kind. I've prevented another war, Kexor responded. I was there at Roswell. I saw what these hybrids are capable of. They downed our ship with technology we still don't understand. It wasn't technology, Daniel interrupted. It was something else. Something your scientists engineered into our ancestors but never fully understood. Psychic ability, Mexleary whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. The Empire was experimenting with neurological enhancements and created something they couldn't control, Daniel finished. We call it the Unity. A collective consciousness that grows stronger with each new awakened mind that joins it. Outside, the human military vehicles remained in position, waiting with eerie discipline. Those soldiers, the commander said. They're all. Like me? No, Daniel shook his head. Most are fully human, but they take orders from those who are awakened. We hold positions of authority throughout Earth's military and governmental structures. What do you want? The commander finally asked, his voice heavy with the weight of inevitability. Recognition, Daniel replied simply. Acknowledgement of our existence and our right to self-determination. And, he paused, his luminous eyes fixing on the commander's, the truth about our origins to be made known to all Vraxians and all humans. The commander stood silent, the full implications washing over him. Everything the Empire had built, its power structures, its hierarchies, its very legitimacy, could collapse under the weight of this revelation. The Empire will never agree, he said at last. They already have, Captain Kexor stated. Your second-in-command received the transmission from Imperial Command an hour ago. They've known about the Awakened for decades. This mission was never about reconnaissance. It was about establishing first contact. The commander stared at his old friend in disbelief. They knew, all along, just as they knew about Roswell, Kexor confirmed. Just as they've known about every myth humans have created about us. The High Council decided it was finally time to acknowledge the truth. Daniel extended his hand, a gesture deliberately human. Commander Vrexnail, on behalf of the Awakened, I formally request diplomatic recognition from the Vraxian Empire. The commander looked at the offered hand, then at Mexleary, whose expression held both fear and hope. Finally, he turned to Captain Kexor, whose gray skin seemed to shimmer in the base's lighting. The soldiers were right to laugh at human myths, the commander said at last, because the truth is far more incredible than anything they imagined. Slowly, with the weight of 100,000 years of history, Commander Vrexnael reached out and clasped Daniel's hand. Let it be recorded, he said formally, that on this day, the myth became truth. 3 weeks after the historic meeting, the Vraxian mothership still orbited Earth, now visible to human telescopes by choice rather than necessity. In Imperial Command's central chamber, Commander Vrexnael faced a communication screen showing 5 shadowy figures, the High Council themselves. Your report is troubling, said Counselor Zixmak, the eldest among them. These awakened ones possess abilities beyond our expectations. Beyond our understanding, the commander corrected. The human named Daniel demonstrated capabilities our scientists thought theoretically impossible. Telekinetic force strong enough to disable energy weapons, telepathic range extending several kilometers, and you believe there are more like him? Thousands, possibly tens of thousands, the commander replied. Hiding among the general human population for generations, they've established their own underground network, government, culture, all while remaining completely undetected by human authorities. Counselor Vexthul leaned forward, her ancient face lined with concern. The diplomatic recognition was a mistake. We should never have authorized it. With respect, Counselor, the commander said, we had little choice. Captain Kexor's transmission to Imperial Command was intercepted by major human governments. The existence of the Awakened Ones is now known to millions of humans. Denying their existence or their origins would only increase hostility. The question remains, interjected another counselor, whether these hybrids pose a threat to Imperial security. The commander hesitated. Their abilities are concerning, but Daniel has assured me their intentions are peaceful. They seek recognition, not conflict. And you believe this creature? Counselor Zixmak's voice dripped with skepticism. A being specifically designed by our ancestors for warfare? Before the commander could respond, the communication screen flickered. The counselor's images distorted, then disappeared entirely, replaced by Daniel's face. Forgive the interruption, Daniel said calmly, but I felt it necessary to join this conversation. The commander stared in shock. How did you bypass your quantum encrypted communications network? Daniel smiled slightly. As I explained, Commander, the Unity gives us capabilities your scientists have yet to understand. From the darkened chamber on the Imperial homeworld, Counselor Zixmak's voice thundered, though his image remained absent. This is an outrage, a security breach of the highest order. It is merely a demonstration, Daniel replied. Had we wished to act against the Empire, we could have done so decades ago. Instead, we waited, we observed, we hoped for a peaceful resolution. The screen flickered again, splitting to show both Daniel and the council. What do you want? Counselor Vexthul asked, her voice tightly controlled. The same thing we've always wanted, Daniel answered. Acknowledgement of our right to exist, recognition of Earth's sovereignty, and a guarantee that no further experimentation will be conducted on humans or awakened ones. You speak as if you represent both species, noted the commander. Daniel's expression grew serious. I do. The human governments you've been negotiating with are largely controlled by us, not through force or coercion, but through strategic placement of awakened individuals in positions of influence over generations. And the humans themselves? Asked the commander. Do they have any say in this arrangement? They will, Daniel promised. When the time is right, the truth will be revealed to all of humanity, not just their leaders. But such knowledge must be introduced carefully to prevent panic or conflict. From the shadows of the council chamber, Counselor Zixmak laughed, a harsh, cold sound. You speak of truth while practicing deception. You claim to represent humanity while keeping them ignorant of your very existence. We learned from our creators, Daniel replied evenly. The Empire has never been known for its transparency. The tension in the communication hung palpable even across the vast distance of space. Finally, Counselor Vexthul spoke. We will continue diplomatic relations as planned, but know this, any threat to Imperial security will be met with the full force of our military might. Daniel nodded. Understood. And know this in return, any attempt to subjugate Earth or the Awakened Ones will be met with capabilities you cannot yet imagine. The communication ended, leaving Commander Vrexnall alone in the chamber, his thoughts troubled by the implications of what had just transpired. Meanwhile, in the observation base in the Mojave Desert, McAlery analyzed data from the ongoing examination of awakened genetic structure. Captain Kexor had appointed her lead scientist on the joint research team, a position that put her in direct contact with awakened scientists working alongside their Vraxian counterparts. One such scientist, a human woman named Eliana, approached McAlery's workstation. "You've been staring at those genome sequences for hours," Eliana observed. "Found anything interesting?" McAlery looked up, still not entirely comfortable with how the Awakened's eyes seemed to shift between human and Vraxian characteristics, depending on the lighting. "Fascinating would be a more accurate term," she replied. "The way your genetic structure has stabilized what should have been incompatible DNA. It defies everything we understand about xenobiology." Eliana smiled. "Yet here I stand, living proof that your ancestors' experiment worked, just not in the way they intended. That's what troubles me," McAlery admitted. "Our historical records indicate the hybrid program was abandoned because of instability in the genome. The subjects were supposed to have deteriorated within a few generations, but we didn't." Eliana's voice carried a hint of pride. "Instead, we adapted, evolved. The very instability your ancestors feared became our greatest strength." McAlery's gill flaps fluttered with scientific excitement. "The variance patterns in these sequences suggest your DNA can actually rewrite itself in response to environmental pressures. It's as if we were designed to be the perfect adaptive organism," Eliana finished, "capable of surviving anything, including your Empire's attempt to eradicate us." Before McAlery could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the base. "Unauthorized vessel approaching Earth atmosphere," announced the automated system. "Imperial military signature detected." Eliana's expression hardened instantly. "You were expecting reinforcements?" "No," McAlery said, already moving toward the command center. All diplomatic arrangements were explicit. No additional Imperial ships without prior notification. They reached the command center to find Captain Kexor already there, his expression grim as he studied the tactical display. "Destroyer-class warship," he announced as they entered. "Transponder identifies it as the Imperial Enforcer." "Who authorized this?" McAlery demanded. "No one," Kexor replied. "At least no one on our side. I've already contacted Commander Vrexnall. He's as surprised as we are." Eliana stepped forward, her eyes now fully Vraxian, glowing with intensity. "It's the Purists, isn't it? The faction within your empire that opposed recognition of the Awakened Ones." Kexor nodded grimly. "It appears certain elements within Imperial Command have decided to take matters into their own hands." On the display, they watched as the warship took up position on the far side of Earth's moon, effectively hiding from human detection, but visible to Vraxian sensors. "They're deploying something," McAlery observed, pointing to small objects ejecting from the vessel. "Orbital strike platforms," Kexor said, his voice tight, "designed to penetrate planetary defenses and deliver targeted attacks from orbit." Eliana's face showed no fear, only cold calculation. "They're planning to eliminate the Awakened Ones. Strike at our leaders simultaneously before formal diplomatic protections can be established. We have to warn them," McAlery said urgently. "Already done," Eliana replied calmly, tapping her temple. "The Unity, all awakened, are now aware of the threat." Kexor looked at her with new understanding. "Your telepathic network extends globally?" "When necessary," Eliana confirmed, "though maintaining such connections requires tremendous energy." The command center door slid open as Commander Vrexnall entered, his massive frame radiating barely controlled fury. "The Imperial Enforcer is under the command of Admiral Kexvoran," he announced without preamble. "A known sympathizer with the Purist movement. He's refused direct orders to stand down." "Then this is rebellion," Kexor stated. "Not just rebellion," the commander corrected. "The beginning of civil war. The Purists have been planning this since the first reports of the Awakened Ones reached Imperial Command. They believe any species with Vraxian genetics that isn't under direct Imperial control represents an existential threat. They're right, Eliana said simply. All eyes turned to her. But not in the way they think. We don't seek to destroy the Empire. We seek to transform it. The base's communication system activated, displaying Daniel's face. Behind him stood dozens of other awakened ones, their eyes glowing with unified purpose. Commander, Daniel acknowledged. I assume you're aware of Admiral Kexvoran's arrival. We're attempting to resolve the situation diplomatically, the commander assured him. There will be no diplomatic resolution, Daniel replied. The Admiral has just launched the first wave of kinetic strike weapons against major Earth cities. They'll impact in less than 15 minutes. Horror spread across the Vraxian faces in the command center. This is madness, the commander whispered. Such an attack would trigger full-scale war. That's precisely what the purists want, Kexor said bitterly. To force a conflict that would justify the complete eradication of Earth. Daniel's expression remained eerily calm. We anticipated this possibility. The awakened are prepared to respond. What can you possibly do against orbital strike platforms? Mexleri asked. Even with your abilities, you can't. Watch, Daniel said simply. The tactical display shifted to show Earth's upper atmosphere. The kinetic strike weapons, essentially hypervelocity rods designed to cause devastation through sheer impact force, were visible as they began their descent toward the planet. Then, impossibly, they stopped. Hundreds of weapons simply halted in mid-flight, suspended in the vacuum of space. How? The commander began. The Unity, Eliana explained. Thousands of awakened minds joined together, focusing their telekinetic abilities on a single purpose. On the display, the weapons began to move again, but now in reverse, returning toward the Imperial Enforcer at increasing speed. No, the commander shouted. There are 3,000 crew members aboard that vessel. Most had no choice in this action. Daniel's eyes showed a flicker of emotion. We know. We're not targeting the ship. The weapons suddenly changed course, missing the warship entirely, and instead forming a perfect orbital ring around Earth. A circle of suspended kinetic energy visible even to human telescopes. A warning, Daniel said. And a demonstration. The purists must understand that their weapons are useless against us. The command center fell silent as the implications became clear. The awakened ones possessed power far beyond what even the commander had witnessed. What happens now? Mexleri finally asked. Daniel's expression softened slightly. Now we negotiate from a position of absolute clarity. The Empire must accept that Earth and the awakened ones are beyond their control. Not subjects, but equals. And if they refuse? The commander asked, though he already knew the answer. Then we will demonstrate why our ancestors were both right to fear us and wrong to try to destroy us, Daniel replied. The unity grows stronger with each passing day. Soon not even the combined might of the Imperial fleet could stand against us. The communication ended, leaving the Vraxians in stunned silence. I always wondered, Mexleri said quietly, why human myths portrayed aliens as both terrifying and advanced. Now I understand. They weren't describing us, Captain Kexor realized. They were describing themselves, what they would become once they awakened to their true nature. Commander Vrexnal moved to the view screen, staring out at the distant Earth. Beautiful, blue, and now protected by a ring of weapons turned against their makers. The soldiers laughed at human myths, he said softly, not understanding that in those myths lay the prophecy of our future, not conquerors, but progenitors of something beyond our imagination. As if in response, the suspended weapons in orbit began to glow with strange energy, not Vraxian technology, but something new, something hybrid. The energy spread until it formed a shimmering barrier around the planet, a shield created from the very weapons meant to destroy it. The next chapter begins, the commander said, his voice heavy with the weight of history unfolding before him, and it will be written not by the Empire, but by what we created when we reached for the stars and found not conquest, but transformation. 3 days after the failed attack, representatives from every major power in the Empire gathered in the Grand Assembly on the mothership. The vast chamber, designed to accommodate diplomatic functions, now felt claustrophobic despite its size. The air hummed with tension, as Imperial officials faced a delegation of awakened ones led by Daniel. At the center of the chamber stood a holographic display showing the Imperial Enforcer, now surrounded by a field of energy unlike anything in Vraxian technology. The warship remained intact but completely immobilized, its crew unharmed but unable to regain control of their vessel. Grand Admiral Zex Corvin, the highest-ranking military official present, stepped forward. His ceremonial armor gleamed under the chamber lights, medals and commendations, speaking to centuries of service to the Empire. "This act of aggression against an Imperial vessel cannot stand," he declared, his voice resonating through the chamber. "Regardless of Admiral Kexvoran's unauthorized actions, the ship and its crew must be released immediately." Daniel, dressed in simple Earth clothing that seemed deliberately understated among the ornate Vraxian attire, remained seated. "The crew is free to leave at any time," he replied calmly. "Escape pods are fully functional. The ship itself, however, will remain neutralized until formal treaties are ratified. Treaties with explicit provisions against military action." "You speak as if you have the authority to dictate terms to the Empire," the Grand Admiral said, gill flaps rippling with barely controlled anger. "We have the capacity," Daniel corrected. "Authority is a construct that matters only to those who recognize it." From her position near Commander Vrexnile, Mex Leary watched the exchange with growing fascination. The laboratory analysis of awakened genetic structure had revealed aspects of their abilities, but nothing that could explain what they had witnessed. The synchronized telekinetic power to halt orbital weapons, the creation of an energy field beyond Imperial science. Daniel's gaze shifted, meeting hers across the chamber. A slight nod acknowledged her thoughts, as if he had heard them. Perhaps he had. The Imperial Chancellor, a civilian leader known for her diplomatic skill, stepped forward. "Perhaps we should focus on the path forward, rather than assigning blame for recent misunderstandings." A ripple of murmurs passed through the Vraxian delegation at this characterization of what had nearly been a planetary assault. "Indeed," Daniel agreed. "The awakened seek recognition, not conflict. We propose a new relationship, not as subjects of the Empire nor as enemies, but as independent allies." "Allies?" the Grand Admiral scoffed. "Your kind was created to serve, not to ally." Daniel's eyes flashed with that unnerving luminescence. "And yet here we stand, evolved beyond our Creator's intentions." "It seems the universe has a sense of irony." The Chancellor raised a hand for calm. "What specific terms do the awakened propose?" Daniel stood now, his movement drawing all eyes. "Recognition of Earth as a sovereign world, protected from all Imperial interference. Acknowledgement of the awakened ones as a distinct species, with all rights thereof. Access to Vraxian historical records regarding our origins. And," he paused, "a shared research initiative to understand the potential of the Unity." "And in exchange?" the Chancellor asked. "We share our understanding of abilities your scientists believed impossible. We establish diplomatic relations that benefit both our peoples. And most importantly, we help prepare the Empire for what comes next." The Grand Admiral's gill flaps tensed. "What does that mean? Is that a threat?" "A warning," Daniel clarified. "The genetic adaptability your ancestors engineered into us has consequences they never anticipated. We continue to evolve, to develop capabilities beyond even our current understanding. This evolution accelerates with each generation." Commander Vrexnale stepped forward. "You're saying the abilities we've witnessed are merely the beginning?" "Precisely," Daniel confirmed. "The most recently born among us show signs of advancement beyond anything seen before. Their connection to the Unity manifests from birth. Their abilities to manipulate energy and matter exceed our own by orders of magnitude." Mex Leary could remain silent no longer. "The children, they're the next stage?" Daniel nodded. "We call them the Ascended, though still few in number. They represent what all awakened may eventually become." A heavy silence fell over the assembly as the implications settled in. Finally, the Chancellor spoke again. "You said you would help prepare us for what comes next. What did you mean?" For the first time, Daniel's confident demeanor faltered slightly. "There are," entities in the cosmos that became aware of us when we activated the unity at full capacity, ancient consciousnesses that exist beyond conventional space-time. They have been watching, waiting for a species to evolve the capacity for direct communication. Entities? The Grand Admiral's skepticism was evident. You expect us to believe in mythical cosmic beings? Daniel smiled thinly. Just as humans once considered aliens mythical, just as your young soldiers laughed at human myths that contained fragments of truth, he turned to address the entire assembly. What the Empire has never understood is that consciousness itself is a fundamental force of the universe, one that can transcend the physical realm when sufficiently evolved. Captain Kexor moved to stand beside the commander. You're describing what our ancient texts called the Ascension, a theoretical state in which consciousness separates from physical form. Not theoretical, Daniel corrected. The Ascended Children have already established contact. They speak of revelations that will transform our understanding of reality itself. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's main doors slid open. A human child entered, no more than 10 years old by appearance, with skin that seemed to shimmer with subtle iridescence. Her eyes were unlike either human or Vraxian, pools of swirling energy that shifted colors as she moved. Every Vraxian in the room instinctively stepped back. There was something about the child that triggered primal recognition, a sense of being in the presence of something beyond comprehension. This is Sarah, Daniel said quietly. One of the first ascended. The child spoke, her voice somehow both childlike and ancient. Your ancestors created us to be weapons, she said, addressing the Vraxian delegation, then tried to destroy us when they realized what they had done. Now you face the same choice, embrace transformation or cling to control. The Grand Admiral found his voice first. What are you? Sarah smiled, an expression of both innocence and unfathomable wisdom. I am what comes after, the bridge between what is and what could be. She raised her hand, and the holographic display in the center of the chamber transformed, no longer showing the immobilized warship. It now displayed what appeared to be a map of the cosmos, but unlike any star chart the Vraxians had ever seen. Points of light connected by threads of energy, forming patterns that seemed to pulse with life. The network of consciousness, Sarah explained, the true structure of reality. Physical space is merely its shadow. Mexleri moved closer, her scientific curiosity overcoming her apprehension. This is impossible, only according to your current understanding, Sarah replied gently. The entities Daniel spoke of exist here. She gestured to bright nodes where countless threads intersected. In what you might call cosmic consciousness hubs, they have been guiding evolution throughout the universe, waiting for a species to develop the capacity for direct communion. And the Ascended Children have achieved this? Mexleri asked. We have made contact, Sarah confirmed, but full communion requires something more, a unified consciousness that spans species boundaries. Vraxian and human and awakened, joined in understanding beyond individual identity. The implications landed like a physical weight on the assembly. Not merely diplomatic relations or scientific cooperation, but something far more profound. A fundamental reimagining of what it meant to be sentient. Commander Vrexnall stepped forward, studying the child with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Why reveal this now? Why not keep these capabilities hidden? Because the choice affects us all, Sarah answered. The entities have shown us possible futures. In one, fear leads to conflict. The Empire attempts to contain or destroy what it cannot control. Billions die as technologies beyond your understanding are deployed in desperation. And the alternative? The Chancellor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cooperation. Understanding. The beginning of an evolutionary journey that transcends physical limitations. Sarah's otherworldly eyes seemed to encompass the entire assembly. Your ancestors created us by accident in their quest for power. Now we offer you purpose in a quest for meaning. The chamber fell silent as each being present contemplated the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Not merely first contact between species, but first contact with a new paradigm of existence. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, Commander Vrexnall spoke. When I was young, our teachers told us that the universe was ours to conquer, that the Vraxian Empire would spread across the stars, bringing all other life forms under our dominion. He paused, looking at the assembled diplomats and military leaders of his people. But standing here, I am reminded of something my war companion once told me after we crashed on Earth. He said, "The greatest discovery is not finding what we seek, but finding what we never knew to seek." He turned to face the awakened delegation and the luminous child. "I believe we stand at such a moment now." The Grand Admiral's gill flaps fluttered with agitation. "This is madness. These creatures propose the end of everything we've built, our society, our identity, our very understanding of self." "No," Daniel corrected. "We propose its evolution." The Chancellor, ever the pragmatist, studied the cosmic consciousness map still hovering in the chamber's center. How would such a cooperation begin? Sarah stepped forward, her small form somehow commanding the attention of every being present. With a simple demonstration, a temporary linking of minds between volunteers from both sides, a glimpse of what communion offers, she extended her hand toward the assembly. "Who among you is brave enough to see beyond the myths you've created about yourselves?" A long moment passed in absolute silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, McSleary stepped forward. "I volunteer," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Captain Kexord joined her. "As do I." The Chancellor hesitated, then nodded. "For the sake of understanding, I will participate as WL." One by one, others from both delegations stepped forward, curious, frightened, but unwilling to let this moment pass without being part of it. Sarah smiled, a child's joy mixing with ageless wisdom. "Join hands," she instructed. "Form a circle." As they complied, Vraxian hands clasping human ones, Sarah stepped into the center. She closed her extraordinary eyes and raised her arms. "What you are about to experience," she said softly, "is just the beginning. A wave of energy, not physical, but somehow perceptible nonetheless, emanated from the child. It washed over the circle, and as it did, minds opened to one another. For one breathtaking moment, boundaries dissolved. Vraxian commanders experienced the fear and wonder of humans who had lived in the shadow of myths about creatures from the stars. Human diplomats felt the pride and ambition of an empire that had spread across galaxies. And through it all ran the current of the awakened consciousness, the hybrid perspective that bridged worlds and saw beyond limitations. When it ended, many fell to their knees, overcome by the experience. Others stood in stunned silence, tears streaming down faces both human and alien. Commander Vrexnail was the first to speak, his voice trembling with emotion never before expressed in his centuries of life. "All this time," he whispered, "all this time, we thought we were exploring the stars, when in fact, the greatest frontier was within." Sarah finished for him. The commander nodded, then turned to face the Grand Admiral and other skeptics who had refused to join the circle. "You cannot understand what you refuse to experience. But know this, what I have just felt changes everything." Daniel stepped forward, placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "This is the beginning of a journey neither of our peoples could have imagined. Not conquest, not subjugation, but transformation. The myths your soldiers laughed at were shadows of a truth far more profound than either humans or Vraxians could have conceived alone." Outside the mothership, Earth continued its serene rotation, the ring of suspended weapons now transformed into a shimmering barrier of energy. No longer a defensive shield, but a visible manifestation of the bridge between worlds. And somewhere in the cosmic consciousness that Sarah had revealed, ancient entities observed as the first tentative steps were taken toward a future beyond form, beyond species, beyond the limitations of physical existence. The universe, it seemed, had a grander design than conquest after all, and it had been hidden in plain sight. In the myths both species had created about themselves and each other, in the laughter of soldiers who could not see that in mocking human stories. They were failing to recognize the greatest story of all, the evolution of consciousness itself. As the assembly disbanded, forever changed by what they had experienced, Commander Vrexnail found himself standing beside McSleary at a viewport overlooking Earth. "Do you think we were always meant to find this path?" she asked quietly. The commander considered this, Perhaps the very act of creating the awakened set us upon it, though we could not have known where it would lead. The ultimate irony, Max Leary observed. Our ancestors created them to extend our empire across the stars, and instead, the commander finished, they will lead us beyond the stars entirely. Together, they watched as Sarah joined a group of awakened children gathered on the observation deck below. The children's forms seemed to shimmer with internal light, their movements synchronized as if guided by a single mind. The future had arrived, and it wore the face of what they had created, then feared, then finally, at long last, understood. The myth had become truth, and the truth was stranger, more beautiful, and more profound than any story ever told.